economic advisor. Also have our field director just returned from different cities, has been traveling on behalf of the organization, Miss Kimberly Hartfield, and also we have our executive secretary, Miss Jeanette Fields. But on the line right now, you all, we have Martin Luther King III, who I consider his father was an icon. My dad back in the 80s and 90s used to do the Martin Luther King speeches and stuff. So he's on the line right now. So we gotta we're going to interview him. I don't know how long he's going to be with us, but this is history. This is history going on with Real Talk with New Order. So, Mr. King, how you doing?
I'm doing well, and hope everyone there is well as well.
First of all, this is a privilege. I remember meeting you in the parking lot after I did the press conference on behalf of Michael Vick. And that handshake you gave me little shivers, because that's history. Your dad was a major icon. Your family has been doing great work or whatever. So we probably just going to kind of ask you some questions or whatever. So you can kind of introduce yourself. After you introduce your presentation, we probably have some questions for you. So at this time, you are live on Real Talk with New Order. You are live on Facebook and YouTube. So at this time, you can go ahead and introduce yourself, sir.
All right. Well, thank you for the opportunity. And thank you for having me today. Certainly, I am the oldest son of Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott King. Basically involved in social justice my entire life.
Right.
I remember as a maybe 12-year-old child, my mother, I might have been 13, sent me to Detroit, Michigan to actually represent her right after Dr. Angela Davis was released from jail. And we had a huge rally in Detroit. Needless to say, as a 13-year-old child, even though I had a front row seat to the modern civil rights movement because of the leadership of my father and many others, I was petrified to be in front of about 8,000 people giving some remarks. But it was a wonderful experience. I'll go on and advance very quickly. I graduated from high school in Atlanta, attended Morehouse College, graduating with a degree in political science and history.
Right.
I also was involved in, for a very, very short period of time in the hotel business, and went to be engaged in hotel management. But ultimately, I started working after graduating from college. After a year in the hotel management program, I ended up working for Mayor Andrew Young at the time, Ambassador Andrew Young, in his office. Later on, running for public office myself here in Atlanta as the Fulton County Commissioner for about 7 years. And then, of course, I ended up running several nonprofit organizations, which I still am involved with a number of them. I'll start off with the Martin Luther King Center, which I've done a lot of organizing for, and at one point was the CEO, president and CEO. I also was the fourth president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the organization my father co-founded. My leadership started right after the late great Dr. Joseph Eccles Lowry as the third president of SDOG, I being, again, as I said before. I also started an organization called Realizing the Dream, and also have worked with an organization called the Drum Major Institute. All of these organizations are always involved in essentially moving the needle around civil and human rights. And in light of the fact that we live in a nation that perhaps should have been much further advanced than it is around the issue of civil and human rights, we find ourselves fighting these issues every day.
Right.
Hopefully working so that the clock is not turned back but so much. And so even this particular day, as we have just completed one segment of election, meaning the president and many other people have been elected, a new president, fortunately. But here in Georgia, as we all know, an election is going to take place in January,
Right.
To determine who will be leading the United States Senate. And fortunately, we have two outstanding candidates on the Democratic side. One, Dr. Raphael Warnock, pastor of Ebenezer, the church of my father, co-pastor with his father, and the second one, John Ossoff. And I'll stop right now.
No problem. Well, you know what? You could take how much time as you want, because again, I'm originally from Ohio. And when I first moved down here, the first thing I did, I visited the King Center. I had the opportunity to meet your mom, matter of fact. And I had a picture with her, and unfortunately, I don't know what happened to it. So you take much as time as you want. So I know we're going to have some questions for you. Mr. Harden, who's the economic advisor, you have a question for Mr. King?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask him about a quote his father had made back in, he made it toward the rural when he said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And we live in a climate in this society right now where injustice is almost overlooked by our society, especially with all the killing of unarmed black men by officers and other different, mayhem that's going on in our society.
I'm sorry, was there a question or was that a comment? I missed.
No, I missed
it.
Yeah, I just wanted to know your take on it, fathers, the injustice that's still involved in this society as we witness the things that's transparent.
Unfortunately, there are injustices that are taking place, all over the globe, but certainly as it relates to the African American community and communities of color. And Dad did say injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. I can't be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. And you can't be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be, because our destinies are tied together.
Right.
Now, to some degree, we as a society, for whatever reason, put on blinders and act as if something does not affect us. And I'll give the example. For years and years and years, we have been going through police brutality and misconduct. And over the years, slowly, little by little, more and more people have come to the forefront and began to understand the concept Black Lives Matter. For many, and unfortunately, there's still some who don't understand for whatever reason. But tragically, after the tragic death of George Floyd, the entire world saw a policeman act as judge, jury, and executioner all at one time.
Right.
And saw the injustice. And all of a sudden, again, Black Lives Matter is a concept and the organization that was founded by 3 African American women 8 or 10 years ago has begun to gain steam. But that was the highlight where all over the world, not just in the United States, there were demonstrations we know in every state in our nation, but there also were demonstrations in Australia, demonstrations in Europe, demonstrations in South America, demonstrations in Canada, demonstrations on the African continent, all saying Black Lives Matter. So, again, that represents a significant injustice that is consistently going on, not just then, but every week. Something is happening in our community around police engagement. And that is one area, one of the significant areas that we've got to address. And the hope is, because we have an incoming new president and vice president, that is President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect, at least we have ability to dialogue with those who have stated that systematic racism does exist in police departments and that we are committed to addressing that. So the previous administration or the current person who sits in the White House has said that racism in police departments does not exist. So obviously, that individual was never going to address the issue.
Right.
So we at least we have an opportunity, and that's what is a positive. We got a long way to go. It's a positive step, but at least we have people who feel compelled to listen, because it was our community that helped to make the margin of victory for these two individuals that will be coming to office.
Well, Mr. King, I have a question. When I first moved to Atlanta, I lived in Cobb County first, and that has known as be a racist county. But this year alone, throughout the Metro Atlanta area, a lot of African Americans has been elected in public office, and I'm very shocked on Cobb County. They elected the first Black sheriff, the first Black DA, and also Kimberly, if you could kind of help me out, the first chairwoman who's African American, Miss Lisa Cupid. So the Metro Atlanta area had made history. Then we got somebody in Henry County. We had the first Black female in DeKalb County. So what you think about the progress as African Americans starting to hold these elected, these official seats right now that's coming on here outside of Fulton, because Fulton, you do have the majority African American, but what about the surrounding area of Fulton County?
So I think that is extraordinarily significant, the seats that you represented, and there are a couple more. I think Henry County elected an African-American sheriff, and there are a few more that have been elected. Now, that's clearly, to me, that is the first step of change. That is not the cure-all. Right. Because, we need people who understand our experience, who look like us, in terms of how laws are made, in terms of how laws are enforced. Right. So I would never say that just electing someone to office is a cure-all. I'll give this example. I'm very proud of having the fact that I've lived in Atlanta for almost 2 years. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, 61 years, because I started off. I was born in Montgomery. Okay. My father was pastoring a church, Dexter. It now is the Dexter Avenue King Memorial Baptist Church. It was then Dexter Baptist Church. So when I was born there, and we moved here in 1960. So being here for all these years, and in Atlanta now, we've had Black mayors, Black city council members, Black school board members, a number of Black businessmen and women. That is wonderful. But if you look at our own city, it is really the biggest challenge and concern that I have is the system of education. And I want to say this constructively, because I don't ever want to feel like I'm destructively being critical. But I must be constructively critical about our city, because when you look at the fact that we have all of the African American leaders who've been in power for a number of years, we still have a public school system that is not operating at the highest level that it can operate. I agree with that. And that's really the metro area. That's not just Atlanta. Right. That's, DeKalb County is not where it needs to be. Certainly Clayton County is not performing where it needs to be. Cobb may be slightly different. Gwinnett is maybe slightly different. But we should have the best system of education on the planet. Why? Right. And let me explain what I mean by that. We have at least 15 or so Fortune 500 companies here. Coca-Cola, Delta Airlines, the Southern Company, Home Depot, UPS, just to name a few, and there are many more. Those companies alone should find ways to join with our community to bolster the system of education, because at the end of the day, they want to make sure those corporations should be thinking about preparing a workforce for themselves. So for a selfish interest, they ought to say, we're going to make our school system second to none. Now, there are 50 cities that also have that same capacity that should do the same thing, whether it's Houston or Dallas or Chicago or New York or even Birmingham. I mean, all of these cities have the capacity to do that, and yet our school systems, our urban education we're not performing.
Right.
So somehow we've got to find a way to challenge the community to focus on creating the best system of education, because if we prepare our young people at primary and secondary levels so that they will be prepared to perform in colleges and universities, we're going to create a better society for all of us. So, I'm saying a whole lot of things. I'm not suggesting that we do not need more African Americans in office, but I'm saying that it's not just Black folk being in office. That's a part of it. But a different part of it is we need corporate infusion of resources, of not just capital. We need human resource. These corporations have the ability to do so much in our society and to help. And they need to be challenged, because if they're not helping those communities become all that they can become, and they're just making profit, what good is it to our society? So that's my own personal view. That's not what I know you asked me about elected officials. I'm proud of what Cobb County, the direction it's moving in. I'm proud of Henry County and electing a sheriff and a few other counties in the metro area. I'm proud that we're electing more women and Black women specifically to office. Right. But we got to do even more, is all I'm saying.
Kimberly Hartfield, who's the National Field Director, she has a question for you, if you don't mind.
Hey, Mr. King. We actually met a few years ago at a Dick Gregory concert when he was last here in Atlanta. I don't know if it was his last appearance or what, but we met there about 5 years ago. So I feel respectfully like we could be on a first name basis, because we all were on a first name basis that night after Dick Gregory talked to everybody. But what I wanted to ask you about is this whole notion, as we're talking about the fact that more and more of us are being represented in government. And we also know the power that we have when we're talking about getting out the vote in Georgia and Atlanta to flip the state blue, the power of the Black vote. But what we're also hearing already is like this notion in the practice of getting to this reaching across the aisle. You've heard that as far as compromising with the other side. And historically, compromising for the sake of bipartisanship has always been sort of detrimental to the Black community. I mean, when we hear compromise, we really feel like we're being sacrificed instead in terms of our agenda. It started, with the 3/5 compromise. We weren't even considered human beings. That was the compromise that was made after the Civil War. So just historically, we always get sort of sacrificed for the sake of reaching across the aisle, for the sake of bipartisanship. And we all know how Joe Biden, prides himself on being able to reach across the aisle. So my question is, how do you think that we should be able to keep the Black agenda in the foreground of legislation this time, so that it is clear that no matter what else has to happen, our Black agenda won't be sacrificed this time anymore?
Good question.
So I think that the president-elect has said that I am indebted, and we have to hold him accountable for that. I am indebted. We all know that had he not been successful in South Carolina, and Black folk, older women and men, and young folk, Black folk, period, delivered him and resuscitated his whole campaign, because he was on his way out.
Right. So
we got to hold him to that standard. And that means that we have to put our agenda in front of him and the vice president-elect. And as I said, I don't feel like our agenda will become, I feel like that it might be moderated, but I don't see how it's going to be compromised. And let me just say this. I think that if we are not successful, I don't want to blame us one way or the other, but it was we as a state are not successful getting 2 senators on the Democratic side in office, then the president-elect is going to have to really do some compromising, because he's got to come to Mitch McConnell and the Republicans to get anything done. That's why it is so critical for us to get these Democratic senators elected so that the Democrats will have, although it will be just a brief majority, the majority will be made up because if the body or the Senate is made up 50-50, the vote is broken by the Vice President of the United States, which will be, of course, Kamala Harris. And so this is why it's so critical, because unfortunately, again, I think we have to realize that if we are not successful in Georgia electing both of those gentlemen, then the president-elect is going to have to compromise more than he would like to, which also will affect our own agenda. But if we're able to accomplish this objective of getting both of these gentlemen, that is Reverend Raphael Warner and John Ossoff, elected, then we can forge forward with the agenda that personifies what we want to accomplish. I don't, you know what, and we never ever give up on our agenda. We have to always push. And in fact, I'll give you this example. One of the things that President Barack Obama said when he came in office was, I need you to stay with me to help me during this governing process. Mm-hmm. Most of us went home and sat on the couch and said, oh, you got it. You won't be able to do anything. So I'll give this example. There were times when the generals recommended using drones, and drones were used to drop bombs on black folk in Africa, because that's what the generals said. And we didn't say anything. And so President Obama couldn't go back to the generals and say, look, I can't do what you're suggesting because, you know, you all are the experts, but then, you know, I'm not getting pushed back. Nobody's saying anything. Wow. We sat down and did not continue to mobilize and organize. So for our agenda to be effective, we have to always be mobilizing and organizing and forging forward, even in spite of whatever the conditions are. You know, my father understood that. My mother understood that through their leadership. They continued to forge forward. My mother even used to say, every generation has to earn its keep. Right. Meaning that, you know, we don't have the luxury to just say, okay, we've elected this person, we can go sit down and rest. Because when we do that, then the other side is fighting 24/7, and they are able to advance. There's no way that even the current administration, there's no way that it should have been able to arise and emerge like it did, other than the fact that we were not mobilized and we were not organizing. And as a result, they have sort of set things back, and now we have to figure out how do we move forward. Some of it may be done with executive orders that the president will have the ability to do once he's in office after January 20th. But he still is going to need a majority if he wants to get, or if we want to see progressive issues and an agenda for it forward.
Right. Right. How much time do you have with us, Mr. King? Just want to know.
Probably about another 30 minutes.
30 minutes? Okay, that's fine. That's good. You have another question? Okay. Kim?
Oh. Hey, Mr. King, this is Jeanette. I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you guys so much for taking the opportunity to sit with us. I know sometimes people take for granted that you guys take these roles on, that, you know, you really don't have a choice because of what preceded you. But first, again, I want to say thank you for sitting with New Order. But I had a question. How do you feel about what you see today with the new generation and the activists and the roles that they're taking, our youth? You know, we look for so long for someone to take this position. And I know your dad said we shall overcome, you know, in his speeches. But you personally, knowing and seeing the things that you saw in the history of where we are, how do you feel about the roles that our children and youth are taking?
So I think that what I see generally overall is I feel very good. Thank you for the question, and thank you again for the opportunity. But I feel very, very good about what I see on a daily basis because young people are engaged. And, you know, there are young people who are really keeping the battle going. Those who are protesting on a consistent basis. That's very positive. Now, the reality is none of us can protest 24/7. You have to sometimes take a break.
Right.
So we have to have a number of components to deal with this. One of the things that I've always wanted to see was an African-American think tank that is similar to the Brookings or the Hoover Institute or any of these large think tanks where, you know, they're funded at millions of dollars. And quite frankly, we have, while we don't have a whole lot of billionaires, I think we have enough that could reach out to other people who are very wealthy. And, you know, to think about, we spent $1 trillion last year. If we were able to come up with $1 billion as a community, but largely coming from those who are very, very wealthy, to put together a think tank, because most of the concepts that are done that we see, they're people who, you know, come to work every day. They don't have to worry. You know, they're some of the best and the brightest, and they're sitting around thinking about coming up with concepts as to how we resolve these issues. And our community, our issues are so severe that we need the top folks. It needs to be a coalition, but we need people who are dedicated. Their job is to come and think about how do we resolve these issues, because there's no issue that cannot be resolved. And so, as an aside, I want to see us pull together a group of our business leaders to establish that as one entity. The other thing I'll say is, I cannot compliment enough the young people who are out here on the front lines every day. You know, whether they're involved with the Me Too movement or the women's movement, whether they're involved with Black Lives Matter, where a significant number of them are, whether they're involved, you know, with the Parkland, the movement around guns, you know, because we got all kinds of young people who are engaged. There's some young people who are involved in climate change. And, you know, there's got a young lady, 17 years old, Greta Thunberg, who is leading that effort in a different country, but all over the world. So there are young people leading. You know, I'm very fortunate, my wife and I, that our daughter is involved using her voice and her platform to talk about, you know, bringing about change in our nation. So I applaud the young people. Now, you may ask the question, well, what about those who engage in violence? And my only point of view is that my father used to say that riots are the language of the unheard. He never, you know, he never condoned violence, but he also understood that if you don't give people relief and give them tools,
that's right,
then they may resort to violence, because they're so angry and frustrated because they've been mistreated and misused and abused for so long. And so my point is, we've got to find a way to create the climate where people don't feel that they have to use violence, that there is a better way. And some of that comes through looking at existing legislation. That's why it takes a think tank, I'm saying, and bolstering that legislation or creating new policy, new legislation. And oftentimes legislation comes through the think tank process. So these are some of the ways that we can begin to address these issues. But again, you know, I am very proud of what young people are doing, and will always stand with them, because we need their energy, their enthusiasm for us to get change. And you know, there's so many problems that impact our community most specifically. And the other point is, we got to figure out how to pool our dollars. Because we as a community, as I said, we spent over $1 trillion last year. We don't have one black bank out of the, I don't know, there may be 20 black banks now. It may not be quite that many. But we don't have one that has $1 billion in assets. So we put all our money in institutions that are foreclosing on us, like Bank of America, like Wells Fargo, like Chase. All of these big banks have foreclosed on black folks, and yet we're keeping them in business every day because, you know, we're putting millions and millions and billions of dollars in those institutions. So we need to look at, okay, how do we support our own institutions and make them strong so that at one time, that's all, we didn't have a choice. We couldn't use white banks, but now we can. We have abandoned our own institutions, and we need to support our own institutions, build them up. Think about if we had just 10% of what we spent last year, $100 billion in black banks. We could support businesses and business development. We could rebuild our communities. We could create jobs, all kind of things that we need to do. But the fact of the matter is, we are not informed as to who we are. And so we decide we will decentralize and support those who really are not supporting us.
Yeah. Well, going back to your point about the coalition that needs to be built, and the youth and the young people, and how we saw over the summer the George Floyd protests and everybody that came together, and how everybody was so surprised and pleasantly surprised at the coalition. It wasn't just, you know, young black people in the streets marching. It was white people, old people, all. And so everybody, you know, developed a sense of like, this time could be different. I'm wondering if you could just put your political science hat on, your degree, to see if you can dust that off a little bit. Have you had a chance to analyze the election results themselves in terms of what were your expectations before the election in terms of how the electorate would vote, and what do you think about how it actually turned out, being that there was record numbers on both sides of turnout? Trump, you know, did get 71 million votes. I'm just wondering, have you had a chance to analyze the results of the election, and does it match what you were expecting given what we saw over the summer?
Good question.
That's a very good question. My first thought would be, no, I have not drilled down and really looked at all the results. I've heard about the fact that, you know, 92% of black women, for example, voted, and I'm dealing with black folk now, but I'm going to deal with the broader in just a minute. You know, I think it was more than that, but 81, 82% of black men supposedly voted, you know, for Biden, which is a significant number. But I think Trump, received about 12% of the black vote, and I forget, it was probably more like 14 or 15% of black male vote. So in terms of what I thought that there was going to be, I really did think there was the opportunity, and this, I'm talking about the whole society now,
right,
to pick up more seats in the Senate, even pick up more House seats.
Yeah.
I thought that many people were basically kind of, you know, aggrieved about Trump, and I didn't, you know, it's a frightening proposition that 71 million people,
yes,
headed towards 72 million people supported President Trump.
Yeah.
That's a strong number, and that number is not going away.
Economics.
So somehow society is going to have to figure out what is it that so many people would support this kind of force that feels like it constantly divides. It majors in dividing, and there's so many issues that really impacted our community. So it's very perplexing, really, as to why black folks in larger numbers, not that black folk would support Trump, I expected that, but for us to have larger numbers is perplexing in terms of what he has said, what he has done, you know, doesn't on the issue that's most impactful in our community, police brutality and misconduct.
right,
I think I said earlier, he already said that there's no systematic racism in police departments. Well, there is racism in police departments, and because we don't see white folk get shot like they shoot us every day. They
right,
shoot us down or every week. So what is that about other than racism as a part of the issue? It's not just that, but that's a part of it. So I think I want to evaluate and look at overall everything, because again, you know, the president-elect is going to have to figure out how to balance some of this, because although his votes are headed towards 78 million, it might be higher. 71 million is not something, you know, that you say you just have to, you discount people. We got to figure out, how do you build relationships with those who might feel disaffected, and how do you govern the whole society? And again, finally, I'll say I've not had time to totally drill down and look at all the statistical data, but I want to understand that. And I would have expected us to have been slightly in a different place, not in the place where it is, the election was as close as it was.
Mr. King, I have a question. My dad, like I said, your dad was a role model to my dad. And growing up under my dad, he was very vocal in Ohio. Our church and house was put on fire, death threat calls. And I know your family went through that. And it was the way how we handled things. I remember it was at the point where we had a police officer had to be in front of our house because like off-duty white officer shot a little 9-year-old black kid. And what happened was someone turned around and burnt down the officer house. So we had an officer in front of our house like 30 days straight. And I know you all went through that. So how did y'all kind of handle that? I know you were younger, but how did y'all handle that as a family? Because your dad was that voice. He was a God-fearing man. But how did y'all handle, you know, your mom? And I know you was a kid. How did y'all kind of handle that situation when things like that was being attacked among y'all family?
Well, you know, I think my father and mother believed that they had to personify what they said. And what I mean by that is, you know, we as happened to your family, we got threats, and often, many times over the years, would have a security presence around. Yeah, and oftentimes that would be policemen. And this is a very interesting question because, you know, even now as an adult, my family from time to time has to have security because of the places that I choose to go.
Right.
And oftentimes we'll get threats.
Right.
Now, you know, you can handle that by living in a box or a glass house and never coming out, or you can say you have faith. You know, Dick Gregory was mentioned earlier, and Dick used to say that, you know, God is fear. You're gonna have fear, but you can't live in fear. You have to really believe. I mean, you don't do stupid stuff.
Right.
But, you know, you have to believe that God is gonna protect you, but also you have to take precautions sometimes. So my point is, you know, even my daughter said something to me that was very interesting. Right after the George Floyd tragedy, since we were very much adherent to the rules of social distancing, and although we still are, and the numbers are going up in our nation, so, you know, we still have to navigate through that situation.
Right.
But she would go outside of our yard, in the front yard, in the backyard, and play. And she would say, you know, I'm nervous about going outside because I'm wondering if a police officer is going to come and do harm to me.
Wow.
And I never, you know, policemen were always friends with me personally, and my brother and sisters, because they had to guard us. So even, you know, when I was stopped by policemen, I had an interaction with them because, you know, they always were around. Not all the time, but a number of occasions. Our home for years, throughout my mother's life, she was assigned a police officer or two until she passed. You know, and so we always were around officers, and so we had a different relationship. So even my daughter, she has been involved with policing to some degree, but after George Floyd, a light went off and she started embracing fear. And so we had to say to her, no, there are elements in some police departments that might not be the right kind of police officers. But the goal and hope is that many officers are there protecting and serving every day. And so we have to find ways to weed out those bad officers. and there are standards that have to be changed.
Right.
And so you don't need to be afraid. And the other thing is your mother and father, we're here, we're going to protect you.
Right.
So, you know, you don't need to be afraid. But that was an interesting dynamic. But the final thing I'll say is that our society has gotten to a point where things are very, very difficult in communities all over the nation. And when you create a climate that is out of control, and what I mean by that is the way the pandemic has been handled. You got, you know, there are already over 100 million people. We don't acknowledge this in our nation, who are living at the poverty level, and many who are living below the poverty level. And that's 100 million people. That is documented. But we often talk about the middle class, even politicians. And we don't talk about how do we address the issues of poverty in America. You know, my father was mobilizing the Poor People's Campaign in 1967 and early 68 before he was killed, where he was going to bring together poor blacks, poor whites, poor Native Americans, poor Americans from all walks of life, to say to our policymakers, we demand the rights to decent jobs with decent pay. In other words, he was talking about a living wage in 1967. We are trying to still get the minimum wage raised
to a living
to
wage.
$15, which is close to a living wage. And yet we've not been successful yet. And so my point is, we've got millions of people who are living in dire conditions, which is going to cause the crime rate to go up, because people will resort to doing whatever they have to do to make ends meet.
Right.
And that should not be the way it is in a nation that has a multi-trillion-dollar economy.
Right.
Even with a bad economy, we still have a multi-trillion-dollar economy. It's how we use our resources. Now, we showed something when we were giving out stimulus money, and the stimulus money will come again, by the way. But we showed, because I think we've done 2 stimulus packages. Those were nowhere near enough. And we should have done a 3rd one, in my judgment. Because people are out on the streets. People don't know where they're going to get the next meal from.
Right.
In this nation with all this wealth.
Right.
That is abysmal. That is unacceptable.
Right.
It's unconscionable. And yet it still exists. But that's why we needed a different kind of leadership, so that we can begin to address all of these issues, a myriad of issues that will ultimately help lift up all boats, because many boats are sinking and have sunk. Right. And that has got to be changed.
One thing I learned is that your dad was all about solutions. When he rallied and protest, he had an agenda. And I've been doing this for many years. And the older I got, I was like, you know, I can't just be out here just to be seen. We got to have some solutions. So that's one thing about this organization. We don't want to just be out in front of the cameras and things like that. You know, this organization is all about solutions. So when we do rally and protest, you know, we're talking about putting money back in our own community. Like when your dad did the protests in Birmingham, it took him over a year to get his point across. For some reason, in 2020, we don't have that same mentality, because a lot of stuff is going on. If we start supporting our own, start shutting stuff down, it could be a change. And like you said earlier, you said we made what, $1 trillion. We can do that, but for some reason, we done made it so far. We live out in these big houses, and we forgot that people are still oppressed. How can we get our Black people attention like that to go back how it used to be? I know these young people are in the streets, but they really want to do the work. They really organize them. But I'm all about protesting, and let's go shut some stuff down so we can be heard. And that's what your dad did back then. And I'm really old school, but I do know that this is a new generation. But I'm hoping we can go back to that. Do you agree or disagree on that?
I don't know. There's no question that one of the reasons that the Montgomery bus boycott was effective and successful was, well, actually it's in the name, because it was a boycott. Yeah. And 60% of the ridership is Black folks.
Right.
And Black folks decided not to ride. And after 381 days, the bus company was almost bankrupt.
Right.
So my point is, we have a power. We spend more We spent $4 billion on chewing gum last year. So, I mean, any one of these corporations, if we start targeting them and decide not to patronize them,
right,
then we will begin to see a different kind of result.
That's right.
Whether we want them to help us with the issue of police brutality and misconduct, whether we want them to invest in our community in a responsible housing plan that creates affordable housing, decent housing for everyone, whether we want them to build better schools that have the latest and greatest technology, and every child has the same, the same, not just ability, but has the same access.
Right.
All of these issues can be addressed, but we have to understand who we are. It really is a strategic plan, and a strategic plan, as you said, my dad and his team and others, not just him, have been strategic in their thinking. That's what we need to deal with today: a strategic focus. You know, you got some black entertainers who are talking about, a black agenda, one Ice Cube. I don't know what that plan is, but at least we need to consider what it is.
Right.
You've got, P. Diddy talking about a black party. Well, it's not just a party, because a party is just, that does give you political influence, but you got to have businesses that are going to support that.
Right.
So it's about entrepreneurship. The more businesses that we create in our community, the more ability we have to support our community. So, all of that, in my judgment, comes from a strategic plan, and a strategic plan could partially come from an African-American think tank that is focused on all these issues. So we have to know when to protest. We have to know when to support new policy. We have to know when it's time for us to elect a different person in office that is promoting our interests. All of that, has to be looked at. We have to know that it's not just about voting for president, but it's about voting for local elected officials, whether it's a city council member, whether it's a school board member, whether it's a county commissioner, whether it's a judge, whether it's a solicitor, or whether it's a district attorney. All of these positions are important to us. Or even whether it's, Lord, I forgot the position, but we take it for granted. But there are people who sit on a board that determine whether or not our utilities are going to go up. Public Service Commission. We got to find out who these people are.
That's right.
Because, the Public Service Commission is supposed to regulate the utilities. Every time I look up, Georgia Power is increasing their price, or the water, or it's going up, or some bill is going up. And if we had the people who are focused on our interests in those Public Service Commission jobs, then maybe we would get more responsible policy there. So it's a comprehensive. It's not one step or the other. It's a comprehensive plan that we need to educate our community about. Because when our community is educated, we perform better. It's just like, it's not just voter registration. It's voter registration with voter education that creates voter participation. And that's what we used to do that we don't do anymore. We just we register people, tell them we gotta vote, but we don't explain all of the nuances of what it means and the considerations of who we should consider voting for. So it's comprehensive.
Okay, we got maybe about 10 minutes left into the show. I think my economic advisor has a question for you, Mr. King.
I just learned right before I came on air that 3 young peoples in my community out in Chicago Heights had OD'd over, they was taking these pills and they laced with fentanyl. And drugs is becoming so rampant in our community. Well, even with the legalization of marijuana, it's becoming, it's going to have a strong impact on our future generation. My question to you is this here, sir, is what you think we should do as a people to address drug addiction and drug problems that's being being spread in our community?
Good question.
That my brother is a very good question, and I'm not sure that I have the answer. I will take a shot at it, meaning that, I think that, first of all, when we look at the drug usage, it is beyond rampant. And it's going to take a monumental effort of a lot of different people working and focusing on it, because some of it is, largely around drug usage and treating those who have a substance abuse challenge. But some of it is around, addressing why there's a problem in our community in the first place. Drugs don't walk in our community. Somebody is bringing them in our community. Right. And, it's all predicated on economics. Someone is making billions and billions of dollars, bringing drugs into the community. And as long as our community is strung out on drugs, it really can't effectively deal with the other problems.
Right.
But oftentimes people do resort to drug usage because they are trying to escape a particular situation. Yeah. And once you get hooked on it, then it becomes a medical issue. You gotta have some medical assistance to move beyond it. Right. Because there's nothing more powerful than an addiction. Many of us are addicted to all kinds of things. And the addiction of cigarettes, the addiction of drugs, and many of us are addicted to the wrong kind of foods. All of these addictions impact, or all of us are addicted to sugar. Right. In our society, right. Sugar and salt. So one of the things that I will say is, if the Nation of Islam, under the former leadership of the late Elijah Muhammad, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, was able to get people off drugs in Chicago and other cities, we need to figure out what he was doing, and even today, what the nation does under the leadership of Minister Farrakhan. And we need to use those techniques in our community because they seem to work. Right. They have a track record of addressing these issues. Wow. And we got to reach out to our brothers and our sisters. That's and I think that they to me, they know more than anything else. Dick Gregory used to talk about nutrition. Right. So when you provide the right kind of nutrition, then you don't crave those substances that do harm to you. Right. And so, that's a complex kind of situation to some degree. But I think that's where we found the answer. We look at what the nation did, because the nation was able to get brothers who were strung out off of those drugs. Yeah. And so to me, that's something that we in the broader community need to start not just questioning, but start embracing. Right. And that's partially how we're going to, I think that's a partial solution as to how we will address this very critical issue. And it's so sad to hear about these young people who have overdosed. Right. And we have to work so that others don't end up down that same pathway.
Right. Yeah. Mr. King, we got one more question.
No, I just wanted to say that 2 of them died and 1 of them survived. Wow. So I just want you to have that bit of knowledge.
I appreciate it. We got one more question for you. We got another guest coming in. We appreciate all the knowledge you gave us, all of the thing information. I didn't learn something today. We got one more question. We got to make it quick. It's coming from our field director.
Mr. Go ahead, King, Kim. I named my youngest son Martin after your father. And my middle son, his name is Malcolm after Malcolm X, and so they are true to their personality, their namesake, the personality. If you know what I mean, they are Malcolm and Martin in our household. And I was wondering if in yours growing up, did you guys ever have did your mom, for example, did she ever surprise you with any kind of quote unquote Malcolm moment, Malcolm X mentality that you would just be surprised, or we would all be surprised that, a response or reaction, or even you and your siblings growing up? Was there any that type of yin and yang going on?
I wouldn't characterize it that way. I would say that, number one, in our home, my mother taught us to have tremendous respect for all of the leadership And, you know, for example, my mother became very close to Dr. Betty Shabazz, of course, Malcolm X's wife and children. And my sister was very close to Attila Shabazz, the oldest daughter of Malcolm X and Dr. Betty. So, you know, we when we got older, we always had a healthy respect. And I think, you know, this is maybe projecting, but certainly had either of them and both of them lived, our whole nation and world would be on a different trajectory.
Oh, yeah.
Because Malcolm X continued to grow in his thoughts.
Yeah.
You know, he and Dad had a respect for each other. They may not have initially agreed on the strategies that were being used. But I think, you know, when they met in 65 and when Dad was in Selma, and they have, I think, one moment that they came together, there was a healthy respect for each other. Initially, there might have been, you know, a combative approach, I would say, on Malcolm X's side. Dad never really approached it from a combative point because he really fervently believed in the philosophy of nonviolence. And he didn't believe that he could deviate from that. He believed he had to personify that. And that's what he tried to do. And I think ultimately, as I said, you know,
so does that mean you and Dexter
to understand and respect, even though he may have disagreed with the strategy. But had he lived, I think he was in great transition. Certainly after he went to Mecca and saw that there were Muslims who happened to be of not all black or brown, but all kinds of skinned Muslims. So he was growing. But my higher point is this. You know, we have to find ways to work with all leadership, even if we may disagree on strategy. Because the issue has to be what is in the best interest of our community, of our nation, of our world. We should be further along with working with our African brothers and sisters, and we aren't. We still frown to some degree on our African brothers and sisters, and yet they have countries. And in all 9 out of the 12 or 14 resources that are needed for survival are found on the African continent. And many of those resources have not even been excavated yet. They're there in the ground. So God put those resources there. We need to have a relationship with our brothers and sisters on the African continent where we actually are from, and we don't know who we are. Part of the problem is we need to learn who we are and understand that everything started on the African continent. The universities and great science and math evolved from the African continent. Yes, Europeans stole a lot of stuff, and they actually act as if it is theirs, but they stole it from the African continent. And until we understand that and understand who we are, we will never get to where we think we need to get. We'll partially get there, but we won't fully get there until we understand who we are and begin to connect those parts and pieces and bring ourselves together, because we are a very strong people, but we don't know it because we've been broken down in this society by institutional racism, and we've got to rise above that. When we become who we are the original kings and queens, not Queen Elizabeth. We are.
That's right.
And we need to know that about ourselves. So let me end by saying thank you so much for this opportunity to share. And I thank each and every one of you for what you're doing every day. And may God continue to bless each and every one of you. And look, we may be at a difficult point right now, but we are going to overcome somehow, some way, someday. But we have to keep on fighting. Keep on keeping on.
That's right.
Thank you, Mr. King. It was a privilege to have you on the show today. I wish we had you in the studio, but we know we do have this pandemic going on. But you know, God got my back, so I really appreciate you coming in, calling in the show, giving some history about growing up under your father's roof when you was young and stuff. So we will be keeping in touch, and God bless you, sir.
Thank you, and bless you all.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right. Again, you are listening to Real Talk with New Order live on Disco 100 Radio. You're live on YouTube, live on Facebook. Now, who I got in the studio, y'all just don't know. The uncut, unmanned, Pan-African, my people, Mr. Dr. Keith Slaughter. Before I introduce you, Mr. Slaughter, I know you always see Leonard, you know, but this is a part of my team as well. This is Noke Harden, who's the economic advisor, Black economics. He does poetry. You know, to your right, you have Miss Kimberly Hartfield, who's my national field director, who travels across the country, get the word out about New Water. Have Miss Jeanette Field, who's the executive secretary, who works in the legal department of the organization. And it's all about you. You know, last week we had Rashad Ritchie, where you was sitting at, but I know it's a question. Go ahead and introduce yourself, but there's a topic I want you kind of touch. I'll bring it to you, but kind of introduce yourself. At this,
all right. Am I on? Am I?
Yeah, you on, Mr.
Okay,
Scott.
cool.
You know, used to these mics.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I do mics every day.
Right.
You know what I mean? Well, thank you, first of all, for the invitation. I'm glad.
Oh, no problem. We family, bro.
Jeanette, Kim, and brother, tell me your name again.
No Harden.
No Harden?
Yeah, Noke, like Coke. Yeah.
Noke, brother Noke. Yes, brother. Good to meet you, sir.
All right.
And of course, brother president, you know, it's my president as well. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you did join the membership.
Yeah,
that's right. He's a part of New Order, y'all.
Yeah, that's the only president I got.
The only president we recognize.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying. And but I'm just glad to be here.
Okay.
I represent where I've been all day, the beloved community church of Atlanta, pulling it together, and putting it down, trying to make it whole together. And and just doing what I do. I'm also a professor of the psychology of religion on the faculty at the Interdenominational Theological Center. That is the seminary that's in the AU Center. And, you know, I was talking to a brother the other day who was saying that unless we regain our spiritual foundation, anything that we are attempting to grasp going forward will leave us feeling empty, because you got to have your foundation before you can move forward. So it's my honor to serve in the capacity of assistant professor there. I've been there for about 6, 7, 8 years. Also where I which got my master's and my doctorate. So I'm back, you know, I've been there for the last 7, 8 years. Taught for a while at American Baptist College up in Nashville.
Okay.
And so I've been here, pastored a couple of churches around Atlanta, one over off of Bankhead back in the day.
In the hood.
On Gary Road, you know what I'm saying? And now, and you know, of course, I pastored some other churches around in South Carolina and in Decatur, actually. But now we are doing work, bro, that is the realest work that I've ever been involved in the Pittsburgh community of Atlanta. And if you from the A, you know what I'm talking about. Right. And if you ain't from the A, then come through and get to
give a little history about the Pittsburgh community, if you don't mind.
Pittsburgh is one of the the first intentionally Black neighborhood suburb. It was called a suburb at the beginning of the development of Atlanta. It's bounded by 7585 on the east, by University on the south, Metropolitan on the west, and the railroad tracks. And folks know when you cross them railroad tracks, them Norfolk Southern Railroad tracks, you are now in Pittsburgh. The history is that in the early years, with the railroad track being there and the shops associated with the trains, it was always smoky. And it reminded people of the steel mills in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Gotcha. So it got the name Pittsburgh from the smoke. But it was the first Black suburb. Clark College was in Pittsburgh. You know, and of course Pittsburgh got chopped up and shuffled with Peoplestown. And when 7585 was brought through, when, you know, which is the beginning of gentrification, urban, what they call urban renewal. Well, really what it was a displacement effort that took place all around the country. Wherever there were thriving Black neighborhoods, they chopped them up, split them up, fragmented them, so that the people would find themselves in the same situation.
So we wouldn't have that economic development that we was talking about earlier, as far as that dollar staying in the community, rotating.
One thing about this man, no mean to cut you off, he come behind that pulpit. You know, he held several community events inside this church. You know, me and Leonard been over there several times. Stacy Hill.
Yeah.
You know, so his door is open for the community. He's not just preaching on Sunday. I know you do a lot of feeding homeless and stuff as well,
doing
right?
that, and we're doing a thing, man. Like I was just getting a video produced today. We're getting ready to open what we call there was a church that existed one block over from us.
Okay.
Some years ago, it was called Little Zion. Little Zion Church, and through some turn of events, the church became vacant and open. And we went to the owners and asked about purchasing it, because our church, even though you know, we're a dynamic community, we're small.
Right.
Our facility is small, so we needed more space. Because when COVID-19 came in, we found ourselves we became we had time for reflection,
right,
and we saw that we were woefully inadequate in the service that we were providing, and that we could do better.
Wow.
So what we decided to do was, since the children in our community weren't going to school, we said somebody got to feed them, because they ain't going to school. So I asked the people, can we do that? And they say, yeah, we're gonna do that.
Wow.
So we started feeding the children, and then the adults was like, you know, we hungry. So we started feeding the adults.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? What makes Pittsburgh the special, a unique space that it is, 50% of the homes, the data reflect, are classified as abandoned.
In that area?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
A full 50%.
Wow, that's over half.
That means every other house is classified as abandoned, meaning they are owned by international corporations, the international developers, right? And there's no landlord, there's nobody. They just abandon houses, right? Until they work whatever plan they're gonna work in gentrified, like they plan to gentrify. Well, abandoned does not mean unoccupied. It's somebody in every one of them houses. They just ain't got no lights, they ain't got no gas, they ain't got no water. You know, I feel like, and I thank you for having me on the show, because I feel like, you know, this story ain't being told, sisters and brothers. The story is not being told. Man, I done seen in the last 5-6 months, bro, I done seen what I ain't never seen before, since I was a social worker on the west side of Chicago in the 80s, in the 90s. I mean, I'm talking about people, or just imagine living in a house with no lights, no gas, no water, no nothing, you know, no furniture, no nothing. And the people that we serve, we was like, well, what is needed? Well, first folks need food, because we're food insecure, right? And the next thing, it was like, okay, so since people, we need to try to get folks the food that's already cooked, not only because we were already giving away 30-pound boxes of food every Sunday. We gave anybody who come our way, get a 30-pound box of food, period. Whether you need it or not. If you don't need it, take it and go give it to somebody who do need it. That's just how we started the ministry off. But we said, you know, well, what do the people need? Well, because we was checking out, you know, on Sunday morning, I be damn, man. Can't keep no paper towels. Can't keep no toilet paper. You know, you put it in there, and I'm literally an hour later, all the toilet paper and all the paper towels gone.
Right.
Like, what's going on? It's like, oh,
that's what
the
they
people
needed.
are taking their bath. They're handling their personal hygiene in the space. And we always make sure that the bathrooms were really clean. But then I was like, oh, I'm slow.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So we was like, okay, so what we got to do is we got to create a space where people can come and get showers, where people can come and get some clothes out of the clothes closet, where you can come and charge your cell phone. You don't feel me?
Yeah.
I feel you.
You don't feel me? Because you can get a cell phone under the little tent on the side of the street, right? But can you charge it?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? If you ain't got, so we, you know, those are the kinds of basic needs that we saw being needed, and so we said, well, let's try to meet those needs, because just ain't nowhere in the world I want to be associated with any organization that's supposed to be about caring, and the thrust of the organization is to see how much other people can show their care for the organization instead of the organization showing their care for the people. So for me, the church exists to serve to serve
That's how it's supposed to be.
You know, and anything. Hell, I didn't know this thing was down there like this. Anything that I have ever done, I thought I was talking good. Anything that I've ever done,
Right.
I've done it. First of all, because I wanted to.
Gotcha.
And because it was something that people needed.
That's right.
I don't do stuff that I don't want to do.
Right.
And if I do it, I be cussing and bugging and tripping the whole damn time that I'm doing it until whoever I'm doing it with either tell me to get somewhere or they fire me or whatever.
So that you won't have to do it.
Yeah, so I don't have to do it no more, and I don't know how to quit.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So I'll make folks fire me.
Right.
You know.
Dr. Slaughter, there was an issue that made the news
Mm-hmm.
where you went inside of a gas station. You know what I'm talking about.
Mhm.
I think one of our sisters was being disrespected. I don't know if that's true.
Well, actually, it was a brother.
It was a brother.
Yeah,
You can fix it up. I want you kind of,
but that's something that,
if you don't mind speaking on that.
I'll speak on it.
Okay.
You know,
The reason why, because I consider you as an elder, and you was courage at that time to speak up.
right.
At that time, I know your life was threatened at the same time.
You know, what I can say.
I got you.
What I can say is that the issue was amicably resolved by the appropriate entities, and everything
It's
came
okay.
out all right.
Right. They messed with the wrong one.
Yeah, it was the wrong one.
Right.
That go around.
Right.
And
I was concerned,
and I
though,
know
because
people were concerned. I appreciate everybody who showed their concern, and but that was a situation much like what brothers and sisters experience every day, not only in this city but around the country. Much love, shout out to my Ule Mel Davis, you know what I'm saying, my attorney, who make great things happen out of bad situations.
The reason why I brought that up, because New Orleans is talking about Black economics now.
Okay.
You know, that's why I kind of brought that up, because it's frustrating that people don't look like us, disrespect us, but don't want our dollar.
Right.
That's the reason. Well, that's why this man, I hope he has a question for you, because this is what we talk about all the time about. We got to support our own. So that's the reason why I brought. That's the reason why we have to support our. That's the reason why I brought it up. So you didn't have to get into details. Just the fact I get frustrated where we still support these businesses that's disrespecting
I try
us
not
every
to,
day.
man. I'm intentionally. I try to turn my dollars over with Black people in everything
hard,
that I
though.
do. It can become a challenge, and sometimes you got to let a cracker get $1 or $2. You know what I'm saying? But you know, for the most part, that which I can really control, I try my best to make sure the dollars are exchanged between us. On you know, I do a show, and part of what we got what we're forming is the Black business, the Beloved Community Business Network, where some of the smaller businesses can kind of pool their resources so that we can advertise them and make sure that they get what they need. So, like for instance, I'm poor, right? But I like nice stuff, right? So one things that I've allowed myself a little luxury in is this stuff called sugar scrub, right? Sugar scrub, and my sister Shelly Amin Set, along with my dear brother Ken Wado Moore, they got a thing called Sun Goddess Scents, and they make this sugar scrub, right? Oh yeah. And so after I take my shower, there's another sister named Shishi Coco. She got a soap line. So my body care, you know, it's Shishi Coco make my lather and my foam, you know what I'm saying? Nuritress, one of my sisters that I went to school with at Tuskegee, she got a company where she makes shampoo and all that kind of stuff. I use that on my, on my hair. And then after I get my shower with my soap that the Black woman made, then I hit myself out with that sugar scrub and I be straight. You know what I'm saying? It's something that you can do each and every day to support Black economics. You know, I wash with, you know, if it ain't that soap, it's some other Black soap that I got from the Afrocentric Network or some other Black place. You know what I'm saying?
You have to be intentional.
You really got to be intentional.
You're right.
You know what I'm saying? Right. And whenever you got to break bread with these crackers, try to break them off as small a piece as possible. You know, because you know you got to give them something. Yeah. Because they got it set up like that.
Right.
But, you know, just try to make it as small as possible. Right. You know, and try to bring the rest to y'all people. Right. That's just that ought to be our basic philosophy. I be telling folks about that, about when it comes to historically Black colleges and universities. That's a damn Black business. What you looking like smiling, talking about, my baby, you got into Kennesaw State. Yeah, and your baby and your dollars. Your baby and your dollars went there. You know, my baby going to Notre Dame. Right. Yeah, and your money going there. But when you say, my baby going to Tuskegee, my baby going to Fort Valley, my baby going to Savannah State, you know what I'm saying? My baby going to Alabama A&M. Okay, I'm with you now, because now we turning Black dollars over with Black people. And that's what that is. You know, it's almost crazy as Black folks going to these white folks' churches and stuff and enriching white folks while they kill you, while they murder your brain cells, while they destroy you psychologically. Right. And you kicking money to them. Right. You know what I'm saying?
We can add Morris Brown back to the HBCU.
Ashe, and that's a great thing, man. We, as they do the work, you know, that accreditation game, y'all. That's right. It's just what it is. It's wicked. Yeah. And you got to, if you can't, because what they do is they present a different language. Right. And if you don't speak the language, you out the game. Mm-hmm. And what happens is that you got to stay up with people and surround yourself with consultants who do that particular kind of work, so you can speak that language. Because if you can't talk that language, baby bubba, you know, they're going to be like, well, the accrediting body has decided that there are growing edges in particular areas that would preclude us from being able to affirm your accreditation going forward. In other words, you ain't physically getting no federal money, and if you don't get no federal money, your school closes. Right. You know what I mean? It's all their game, you know? Man, I feel good being on somebody else's show. I don't want to. I said, you're going to speak your mind. So, anybody have a question for Dr. Slaughter? I know you got something for him. I know y'all buy right quick.
Oh, yeah, man. I'm enjoying them, man. You know, your passion is stirring my emotions, you know, and I salute you, bro.
No, oh, bless, bro. I salute you, Black man.
And it's wonderful, man, being able to find somebody of like minds. And that's what I was telling Gerald when I first came down here. You know, from Chicago. I'm from Chicago, but I'm from Chicago Heights.
Chi-Town City.
Yeah.
Represent.
And, you know, I came down here strictly on, you know, my own type of mission, which I wanted to find people that I can engage with. Just like, you know, when I used to talk to the young peoples out there, some of them used to tell me, man, I want to hear that Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, I had a dream speech, you know, and we went at it. But I knew in my heart that, you know, even though we're not monolithic in thought, we monolithic in goals.
And culture. Culture. You know, that's what binds us. And, you know, when we you know, what the enemy is adept and adroit at doing is locating fissures or cracks where they can insert a wedge and then create a wedge issue for among our people, right? You know, you don't hear white men and white women talking about what's wrong with white men and what's wrong with white women. You don't hear that conversation, but on every other damn show you can hear what's wrong with why black men act like that, why white black women act like that. Well, who begins these conversations? Who plants these seeds of discontent among us? You know what I'm saying? Right. Says, hell, we're on the same team. They ain't on our side. And what we are not encouraged to do is to say, you're not on my side. You know what I'm saying? And be clear about it. Don't let it be no ambiguity whatsoever.
They tell us we have to work with them.
You know what I'm saying? Ain't nobody got to work with nobody. You know what I'm saying? What we got to do is try to figure out a way to survive. Because if we don't survive, hell, the rest of the conversation is irrelevant.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
See, what they did, excuse me, I don't mean to
you
cut you off.
good.
What they did was color coded their attitude and personality. They called it tolerance.
Mm.
You know, see, they intolerant. They want, you know, they got zero tolerance for certain behavior.
Right.
But racism, they don't have a zero tolerance for it. They call it tolerance. So it's certain things they will tolerate.
There it is.
No.
You ain't never lied.
Right. Hey, Disco got a question for you, Doc.
Yeah.
How you doing, Doc?
I'm good, brother. Disco.
I got a question for you, man. I'm all about supporting black businesses. My question is, how do we know that's the overall place it's going?
What do you mean? What do you
Because a
mean?
lot of times you got the face of a black college or black whatever it is. That's the face of it. But at the end of the day, that's who collecting it from us.
Yeah. You
How
know,
do we know it's going to end up in a black bank or a black particular?
that's a good question, bro. And I would, the only answer that I would be able to give you now is that you can't be sure. But what I judge my work off of and what I do and people that I encounter is off of motivation. What is their motivation and what is my motivation? And also, ultimately, you'll see fruit. If you don't see no fruit, you know, you stop watering and you stop fertilizing that particular plant if it ain't bringing forth no fruit. You know, what George Bush wasn't able to say, you know, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. I might find myself supporting an organization or a business, a product, an entity that's black owned, and then when I find out it's janky, then I withdraw my support.
I'm sorry, Gerald.
Mm-hmm.
And my other question was, like, I coached football for a long time. And when I noticed a lot of the NFL players, they give their right to their name up to the other man. So basically they'll do camps and charge, the camps will charge $200, $300 a kid. Right. But all that money going to the other guy.
Yeah.
So the other guy giving the NFL player $6,000 to use your name.
Right.
So I'm gonna give you your $6,000, but I'm gonna tax the kid that raised up in your neighborhood.
Yeah, and that's foul, grimy, devil shit. and often black people participate in that. Man, I was looking at everybody have to have seen Harriet by now, the movie about Harriet Tubman.
Yeah.
And their brother, that burly brother, with the beard, and who then killed the woman, kicked the, it was a brother that was the number one slave catcher. You know what I'm saying? And that as an archetype continues to exist in our community. Black people who sell black people out. And ain't no sense in me lying. A lot of them tend to be athletes and entertainers. You know what I'm saying? Let's just be real, because people who get, athletes, entertainers, other people who rise to levels whereby they begin to feel elite, that they have elevated above the average black person, whether it be through athletics, entertainment, whether it be through business, white collar business, or education, or ministry, whatever the field of endeavor might be. When folks start feeling like I can access this cracker money, and cracker money, everybody know cracker money bigger than Negro money. So if I can, whatever I got to do to be able to access this, I'm willing to give up pieces and parts of myself in order to get this meritorious manumission that emerges out of my allowing myself to be misused by those who hate me and who my enemies. Right. And I smile while I'm doing it, dance, do a little jig, the whole damn thing. You know what I'm saying? Because that's what we know what white folks like, and we know how to give it to them whenever it is we think we're gonna get something out of it when we give them what we know they like. Right. They like for us to cast ourselves as inferior to them. Right. They love for us to entertain them. Right. That's why I love to get a ass hell. You know what I'm saying?
You sure do it. Well, I'm a witness.
And Negroes who love them, I make them mad at me too.
Right.
You glowing too. I'm sorry. You got on green, so you glowing with it.
I'm glowing with the green. Yeah. This is a black man shirt. Hustle game. This is a TI shirt. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Goodwill overall.
I heard when you was interviewing when you and Leonard was talking, you kind of mentioned when you worked at the radio station how it offended you when you had to come into the building and put my fingerprint. Kind of explain all that to
man.
I used to be. I like that, man. Because you keep it real.
Well, I tend to think things through, and that's a luxury. The average person ain't got space and time to think things through. Right. Yeah, most of us are in reaction mode in an attempt to survive. We don't have the luxury to respond. But the career that I found myself in as a pastor and as an educator, as a professor, I got space built in my world to think. You see what I'm saying? And so I end up thinking some things through that others don't. And I understand that because I'm enjoying that luxury. Right. So when we were with because I don't enjoy people experimenting with me with biometrics. And that's what that was when to go into that radio station, you had to put they saying, all right, Negro, you finna bow down. You can talk you come in here and get on that mic and talk all the shit you want. But from the time you hit the door, we taking control of your life. So when I walk through the door, hell, I throw up the middle finger with the camera. Every morning when I walk through the door.
For real?
Every morning. I was like, see what they do? I know you watching. So what you gonna do with the information? It took them 5 years. They finally knocked me off. You know what I'm saying? But hell, I enjoy it every day. Man, you got to tell. And what I try to do is I'm an encourager. Meaning I try to put courage in people. Right. I ain't trying to tell nobody what to do, what to think, what to be, how to be. All I want is black people to want to be free. That's what attracted me to New Order.
Gotcha.
You see what I'm saying? Because you're a black man who's saying no matter where I am, I'm trying to get free, and everybody around me, I'm trying to get them here to what it look like and what it feel like to be free, to stand up, to push back, to not go along with your oppression, to not go along with financing your own oppression. Wake up and do something different. You don't know what it's gonna be, but hell, let's just do something different because what we've been doing, that shit ain't even working. Right. You know what I mean?
But I really applaud what you're doing. This man does a lot in the community. Now, ain't Pittsburgh now you heard of the Bluff? Have you ever did any things? The Bluff, I know Bluff is kind of
the Bluff heavyweight, but the Bluff is experiencing gentrification just as well as Pittsburgh is. Okay. I mean, whenever you see a white woman pushing a baby in a carriage down the street, the neighborhood gone, homie. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Now the police showing up in 3 minutes. You know what I'm saying?
What do you feel like as far as Georgia flipping to blue?
That was dope.
So I mean, when you look at the map too, I'd love to see that picture of the map of the Electoral College where the only little southern state down there is blue is Georgia. Well, that's like
black people just got to start doing it, and it took the effort of people like Stacey Abrams and others. And I'm gonna tell y'all, man, and this dude don't get enough credit for black people going to the polls and voting. He really don't get enough credit for this.
Who was that?
Damn stupid ass Donald Trump. Negroes, black people don't like that kind of bullshit. Black people don't like that. When we paying taxes, we want your ass to act like you got a little sense. You know what I'm saying? You living off my tax money. I expect for you at least to act like you got a little sense. And that cracker act like he ain't got no damn sense at all. You know what I'm saying? So even though it's some black people that voted for him and liked his economic policies and this kind of, we don't like that. That's he disrespectful. And with one thing black people are, we are people who place high value on respect.
Right.
We place high value on respect. And he's been disrespectful to black people, to all African nations. every time he get a chance, he's saying something that
is a pathological lie.
Well,
That's
yeah.
the other thing we can't
that's
lie
yeah,
about.
yeah, we don't like it, even though we lie better than white folks, because we had to learn how to lie.
But the pathology behind it, the pathology behind
Yeah,
it
it
is so
is.
different.
You're absolutely correct, sis. I don't argue with that. He's a pathological liar. All I know is, hell, we'll all be dead if we couldn't lie better than white folks. Because hell, they tell more lies than anything. They would have been eliminated us off the face of the planet. But
we good with just doing it better than what they do.
We can beat them lying. They lie like they some no good dog ass liars. But hell, we can get in there too pretty good. You know, hell, you can trick me into thinking anything. And see that? I've already gone.
We got about 1 minute left into the show, 5 minutes left. Any kind of final words, encouraging words to our people only?
Oh, well, yeah, bro. Well, and all people is, love, do justice and love mercy. Do justice. Justice make it so no one is treated unfairly.
Mm-hmm.
Justice is when the people who need the most help get the most help. I'm learning, man, as I push towards 60, how to not be as selfish as I had learned to be,
right?
Being in survival mode. I'm fine, man. It took me to damn near 60 years old to understand that it ain't gonna hurt me to give away something that I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
It took me this long to figure that out, so now I'm enjoying not holding on to things, for dear life, but I got the power to release. And because I got the power to release, I also have the power to receive. And so I just try to stay open to receive what it is that is for me, and also to let go that which ain't for me.
Gotcha.
And
if you want to give out your contact information,
folks can get at me, trappastor.com. Trappastor.com, just like it sounds, TRAPPASTOR.com, and you can check out our show, which is called The Movement, Raw and Uncut.
I love it. I've been watching it.
It's on 11 to 1, Monday through Thursday. I take Friday off because white folks take Friday off. I take Friday off. All right? And you can go to drfkeyslaughter.org and check out, learn more about what we're doing at the church, hit the tab. Of course, hit off a brother, $, the Love Community. That's $, THEBELOVED COMMUNITY. Why? Because we love you. You know what I'm saying? And that makes everything beautiful. We have church, we still doing outside, open air worship. Right. And you think I talk about white folks on this show? Wait till when I get the Lord on my side and I go to preaching. Oh my God, I talk about white folks like a dog. They be standing out on the street, they come out their house and they be like, "Did he just say that? My God, yeah, I said it." And
I told y'all,
check us out.
Righteous,
making ratings today.
The police been stopping by and look. Y'all come on over here too. You're dirty. You know what I'm saying? We have fun, man.
Right.
I don't give a damn. I'm past. Don't nobody give a damn about killing us.
Right.
So why should I give a damn about offending somebody?
Right. That's true.
Through with that. Fin.
Right. You've been listening to Real Talk with New Order live on Disco 100. And much
love to y'all, man.
Right.
This is great. This is
that.
a great situation.
Again, we here every Saturday from 5 to 6:30. Please tune in next week, same time, same bat phone. Next week we will be taking phone calls again. We want to thank Martin Luther King III for calling in, giving us talking to us. Of course, Dr. Slaughter, who is a member of New Order. Y'all just didn't know that he paid his membership when he was at the radio station.
I'm gonna pay again too.
Okay.
I'm gonna renew.
All right. God bless you all. Peace.
All right, peace.
All right.
Bless.
We'll get this picture with you, Dr. Slaughter.
Yes, sir. Be my honor, sir.
We got some ratings today.